The massive space station hung in the darkness like a glittering jewel. Its metal walls curved and twisted in impossible shapes, built by alien minds that thought differently than humans. Inside the Galactic Council chamber, beings from across the galaxy sat around a circular table that floated in midair. Counselor Vexitari stood at the center of the room. His blue skin gleamed under the bright lights and his forearms moved as he spoke. The tall alien had been a member of the council for over 200 years. He had seen many worlds rise and fall. To him, most problems had simple solutions. The Mortuck Empire moves toward the Sol system, Vexitari said, his voice calm and cold. Intelligence reports show 50,000 warships heading for the third planet. The humans call it Earth. Around the table, other council members shifted in their seats. Some had tentacles instead of arms. Others had scales or fur. A few looked almost human, but their eyes were too large or their skin was the wrong color. They came from different worlds, but they all agreed on one thing. They were civilized and most other species were not. Counselor Threshka, who looked like a giant insect, clicked her mandibles together. Should we send a fleet to protect them? The defensive protocols require us to help species that cannot defend themselves. Vexitari waved one of his four hands dismissively. The humans are barely out of their planetary cradle. They have been in space for less than a century. Their weapons are primitive chemical rockets and basic energy weapons. They fight among themselves constantly. Why waste our resources on such creatures? They are still a sentient species, said Counselor Morden, whose body was made of living crystal. His voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. We have sworn to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Have you seen their history? Vexitari asked, touching a control panel. The air above the table shimmered and images appeared. Cities burning, soldiers fighting, weapons exploding. They have been at war with each other for their entire recorded history. They create weapons designed only to kill their own kind. This is not a civilized species. This is barely controlled chaos. The images changed, showing human cities from space. Cars moved along roads like ants in a line. Lights twinkled in the darkness. To the council members, it looked primitive and disorganized. Their technology is thousands of years behind ours. Vexitari continued. They still use fossil fuels. They have not even unified their own planet under one government. The Mortuck will crush them in days, perhaps hours. It will be a mercy, really. Far from the council station, Dr. Hyunwoo Kim floated inside a small research ship near Jupiter. The ship was tiny compared to the gas giant, just a metal box with engines and life support. Kim had been studying the outer planets for 3 months, looking for signs of life in Jupiter's moons. Kim was young for a scientist, only 32, but he was one of Earth's best experts on space biology. He had short black hair and wore thick glasses that kept sliding down his nose in the low gravity. Right now, he was not thinking about biology at all. Are you seeing this? Asked Dr. Sarah Chen, his research partner, from the next room. Kim pushed himself over to the main computer screen. Numbers and graphs filled the display, but one thing stood out immediately. Those are not asteroids, he said quietly. For the past hour, their instruments had been tracking objects moving through the outer solar system. At first, they had looked like normal space rocks. But asteroids did not move in perfect formation. They did not change direction without hitting something else. How many? Kim asked. Chen's fingers moved quickly over her keyboard. At least 500 contacts. Maybe more. They are all moving toward the inner system. Kim felt his stomach tighten. He had always known that Earth might not be alone in the universe. Every scientist had wondered about that possibility, but he had never expected first contact to look like this. We need to contact Earth Command immediately, he said. Meanwhile, Captain So-Young Park stood on the bridge of Seoul Station, Earth's newest orbital defense platform. The station was humanity's pride and joy, a massive ring of metal and weapons that orbited Earth like an artificial moon. It had taken 15 years to build and cost more money than most countries had ever seen. Park was 45 years old and had spent her entire adult life in space. She had been born on Luna Base and had never actually walked on Earth's surface. The artificial gravity and recycled air of space stations felt more natural to her than open skies and wind. Captain, said Lieutenant Commander Jae-ho Ryu, her second in command, we are receiving a priority transmission from the Jupiter Research Station. Park nodded. Put it through. Dr. Kim's face appeared on the main screen. He looked pale and worried. Behind him, Park could see the instruments and equipment of his small ship. Sol Station, this is research vessel Sejong. We have detected multiple unknown objects approaching the inner solar system. Based on their movement patterns and formation, we believe these are artificial constructs, possibly alien spacecraft. The bridge fell silent. Park felt her heart start beating faster, but she kept her voice steady. How many contacts, Doctor? At least 500, possibly more. They will reach Mars orbit in approximately 18 hours. Park turned to her communications officer. Send an immediate alert to Earth Command. Full priority. All defense stations are to go to yellow alert status. Ma'am, said Commander Ryu quietly, Earth Command has been cutting our budget for 3 years. They say the defense platforms are unnecessary. They might not take this seriously. Park knew he was right. Most people on Earth thought the defense stations were a waste of money. Humanity had been in space for decades and had never found any signs of alien life. Many politicians thought the military was just trying to justify bigger budgets. Send the message anyway, Park said, and begin preparations for red alert status. Back in the Galactic Council chamber, Vexitari was finishing his presentation. The images above the table now showed Mortak warships. They were huge dark vessels shaped like beetles, covered in weapons and armor. Each one was larger than most human cities. The Mortak fleet will arrive at Earth in less than 1 day, Vexitari said. Admiral Cornash commands the invasion force. He has never failed to conquer a planet. The humans have no chance against him. Counselor Threshka clicked her mandibles again. Perhaps we should at least monitor the situation. For historical records? Very well, Vexitari agreed. We will observe. But do not expect it to last long. Within a week, the human problem will be solved, and the Mortak will have another world under their control. It is the natural order of things. The strong consume the weak. None of the council members spoke against this. They had seen it happen many times before. Primitive species always fell to more advanced ones. It was simply how the galaxy worked. But as they prepared to watch humanity's destruction, none of them suspected that they were about to witness something that would change their understanding of civilization forever. The Mortak fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the solar system, their dark ships blotting out the stars. Admiral Cornash stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Death's Shadow. Through the massive viewing window, he could see Earth hanging in space like a blue and green marble. It looked so small and peaceful. Soon it would be another conquered world in the Mortak Empire. Cornash was 7 feet tall and covered in thick, dark scales. His species had evolved from predators, and it showed in every line of his body. Sharp claws extended from his fingers, and his yellow eyes could see in almost complete darkness. He had conquered 43 worlds in his career. Earth would be number 44. Begin the attack, he ordered, his voice a low growl that made his crew step back in fear. Thousands of Mortak ships moved toward Earth like a dark cloud, their weapons charged, ready to destroy anything that stood in their way. Intelligence reports said the humans had a few orbital platforms and some primitive spacecraft. It would be over in hours. The first wave of Mortak fighters swept toward Sol Station. Captain Park watched them approach on her screens, her hands steady on the controls despite the fear in her chest. All weapons, fire at will, she commanded. Sol Station's laser cannons opened fire, sending bright beams of energy toward the alien ships. Several Mortak fighters exploded, but more kept coming. There were just too many of them. Hull breach on Deck 7, reported Commander Ryu. We are losing atmosphere. Park knew they could not win this fight, but they had to try. All stations, this is Sol Station. We are engaging the enemy. Good luck to us all. The battle for Earth's orbital defenses lasted 3 hours. When it was over, most of the human platforms were destroyed or badly damaged. The Mortak had lost less than 50 ships. Admiral Cornash was pleased but not surprised. Begin the bombardment, he ordered. Target their military bases and government centers. But something strange happened as the Mortak ships moved closer to Earth. The humans did not surrender. Instead, they began to fight back in ways that made no sense to the alien invaders. Colonel Jamin Lee crouched in the ruins of Osan Air Base, watching Mortak drop ships land nearby. The base had been hit by orbital weapons, but Lee and his Special Forces team had survived in underground bunkers. Now they prepared to show the aliens what human soldiers could do. Lee was a small man, barely 5.5 feet tall, but he had been fighting in various conflicts for 20 years. He knew how to read enemy tactics, and what he saw confused him. They are landing their troops in perfect formations, he told his sergeant over the radio. No scouting, no irregular patterns. They fight like they are on a parade ground. The Mortok soldiers that emerged from the dropships were impressive. They wore heavy armor and carried energy weapons that could melt through concrete. They moved in straight lines toward human positions, expecting to crush all resistance. They had not expected Colonel Lee. Lee's team had spent years training for guerrilla warfare. They knew how to use the environment, how to attack from unexpected directions, how to disappear before the enemy could respond. Most importantly, they knew how to think like their enemies. They expect us to fight like soldiers, Lee radioed to his team. So we will not fight like soldiers at all. The first Mortok squad to enter the ruins of the base found nothing. The humans seemed to have vanished. Then suddenly, explosions erupted all around them, not from weapons but from improvised bombs hidden in the rubble. As the aliens struggled to regain their footing, human soldiers appeared from impossible hiding places, fired quickly, and disappeared again. This was not how warfare was supposed to work, according to Mortok doctrine. Enemies were supposed to meet them in open combat, army against army. They were not supposed to hide and strike like cowards, but the humans were not being cowardly. They were being smart. In a workshop in Busan, engineer Yoo-jin Choi worked frantically with a team of technicians to convert civilian equipment into weapons. Yoo-jin was 28 years old and had spent her life designing mining equipment. Now she was redesigning it to fight aliens. The orbital bombardment platforms they are using have shields, she explained to her team as they worked. But shields are designed to stop energy weapons and missiles. They might not stop simple kinetic impacts. Yoo-jin's plan was crazy but simple. Mining equipment was designed to move huge amounts of rock and ore. With some modifications, it could launch those same rocks into space at tremendous speeds. The aliens would never expect to be attacked by flying boulders. "Are you sure this will work?" asked one of her assistants, a young man named Taiho who looked like he had not slept in days. Yoo-jin wiped grease from her hands and smiled grimly. Only one way to find out. Meanwhile, in the skies above Seoul, pilot Donghyun Nam was learning something important about alien fighter craft. Nam flew one of Earth's newest interceptors, a sleek aircraft that was fast but lightly armed compared to the Mortok ships. In a straight fight, the alien fighters should have destroyed him easily. Their weapons were more powerful, their armor was thicker, and they had better technology. But Nam discovered something the aliens did not expect. Their computer systems were too good. Mortok fighters used advanced artificial intelligence to predict enemy movements and plan the most efficient attack patterns. The AI analyzed flight paths, calculated probabilities, and chose the optimal response to any situation. The problem was that Nam did not fly in optimal patterns. He flew like a human. When a Mortok fighter expected him to turn left, Nam would turn right for no logical reason. When the alien ship calculated that he would climb, Nam would dive instead. When the AI predicted that he would retreat, Nam would attack directly into the enemy's strongest position. "This makes no sense," Nam said to himself as he dodged another volley of energy blasts. But it is working. The Mortok pilot chasing him was becoming frustrated. His ship's computer kept telling him where the human should go next, but the human kept going somewhere else entirely. It was like trying to catch smoke with his bare hands. Back on the Death Shadow, Admiral Cornash was receiving reports that made him angry and confused. His forces were winning, but not as quickly as they should. The humans were not fighting properly. "Sir," reported his intelligence officer, "the enemy is using unconventional tactics. They refuse to engage in direct combat. They hide, strike quickly, and then disappear." "Cowards," growled Cornash. "Send more troops. Overwhelm them with numbers." But the human resistance was not about cowardice. It was about adaptation. Every time the Mortok changed their tactics, the humans changed theirs as well. When the aliens sent heavier forces, the humans attacked supply lines instead. When the Mortok tried to protect their supply lines, the humans hit their communication centers. In the Galactic Council chamber, Counselor Vextari watched the battle with growing surprise. The humans should have surrendered hours ago, but they were still fighting. "How many casualties have they taken?" asked Counselor Threshka. Vextari checked his reports. "Less than expected, much less. They seem to be avoiding direct confrontation and focusing on targets that cause maximum disruption with minimum risk." "That is unusual," admitted Counselor Morden. Most primitive species fight with rage and desperation. These humans are fighting with intelligence. Vextari frowned. Intelligence was supposed to be the mark of a civilized species. But the humans were supposed to be primitive barbarians, not tactical geniuses. On Earth, the impossible was happening. Humanity was not winning, but they were not losing as quickly as everyone had expected. And in war, sometimes that was enough. 3 weeks had passed since the Mortok invasion began. Admiral Cornash stood in his war room, staring at tactical displays that made no sense to him. Red markers showed Mortok positions. Blue markers showed human resistance cells. There were far too many blue markers, and they kept appearing in places where humans should not be able to survive. "Explain this to me again," Cornash growled at his intelligence officer, a nervous Mortok named Veltar. Veltar's claws clicked against his datapad as he spoke. "Sir, the humans have established resistance networks in every major city we have occupied. But these networks do not follow normal patterns. Instead of centralized command, they seem to operate independently, while somehow coordinating their actions." Cornash's yellow eyes narrowed. "That is impossible. No species can coordinate without central command. There must be hidden communication centers. We have destroyed all their military communication facilities, sir. Yet somehow they continue to share information across vast distances almost instantly." What Veltar did not understand, and what the Mortok could not comprehend, was the internet. Even after the orbital bombardment, parts of Earth's global network remained active. Fiber optic cables buried deep underground, satellite links that had survived the first assault, and improvised connections created by desperate technicians all worked together to keep information flowing. In a basement in London, General Myung-Soo Kang sat at a computer terminal surrounded by screens showing data from around the world. Kang was 73 years old and had been retired for 5 years when the invasion began. Now he found himself coordinating a global defense that existed only in cyberspace. "Shanghai reports successful hit on Mortok supply depot," he read from one screen. "São Paulo requests assistance with orbital bombardment pattern analysis. Lagos has captured intact Mortok communication equipment." Kang had spent 50 years in the military, but he had never seen anything like this. Traditional warfare relied on hierarchies, orders flowing down from generals to soldiers. But the current situation was different. Information flowed in all directions simultaneously. A farmer in Iowa could send tactical data to a soldier in Tokyo within seconds. The humans were fighting like a single organism with billions of brain cells, each one capable of independent thought but all working toward the same goal. In Seoul, Dr. Hyejin Lim worked in a laboratory that had been moved 3 times to avoid Mortok patrols. She was a quantum physicist who had been studying theoretical problems before the invasion. Now she was solving very practical ones. "The aliens jam our radio communications using broad-spectrum interference," she explained to her assistant, a graduate student named Minho who looked like he had not eaten a proper meal in weeks. "But quantum entanglement cannot be jammed because it does not use electromagnetic signals." Hyejin had been working on quantum communication systems for civilian use. The technology was still experimental and could only send small amounts of data over short distances. But small amounts of data were often enough to coordinate resistance activities. "If we can create a network of quantum communicators," she continued, "we can establish communication links that the Mortok cannot detect or interrupt." Minho looked at the equipment spread across the laboratory floor. It was a mixture of salvaged components, civilian electronics, and parts cannibalized from destroyed military hardware. "Will it actually work?" he asked. Hyejin smiled for the first time in weeks. "In theory, yes. In practice, we are about to find out." Meanwhile, in the ruins of Incheon, refugee leader Seong-ho Bae was discovering that humans had one advantage the Mortok had not expected. They learned incredibly quickly. Bae had been a social worker before the invasion, helping people navigate government bureaucracy and find social services. Now he helped them navigate the ruins of their world and find ways to fight back. "The key is not to fight the Mortok on their terms," he told a group of civilians who had gathered in an abandoned subway station. "They expect us to form armies and meet them in battle. Instead, we become invisible. We watch, we learn, and we adapt." The group around him was not made up of soldiers. There was Kim Soon-ja, a 60-year-old grandmother who had been a seamstress; Park Dong-woo, a teenager who had been studying computer programming; Lee Yoon-young, a doctor who had lost her hospital but not her determination to help people. None of them looked like warriors, but appearances could be deceiving. The Mortok changed their patrol routes every 6 hours, Bay continued, pointing to a map drawn on the subway wall. But they always used the same timing intervals. Sunja has been tracking their patterns for 2 weeks. Sunja nodded, her weathered hands holding a notebook filled with careful observations. They think in straight lines, she said. Morning patrol at 8, noon patrol at 12, evening patrol at 6. But they never vary the time, only the route. This kind of information was being gathered all across Earth. Humans were studying their occupiers with the same intensity that scientists studied laboratory specimens. Every habit, every routine, every weakness was noted and shared. In the Galactic Council chamber, Councillor Vexitari was having the first serious doubts of his long career. The holographic displays showed a planet that should have been completely conquered weeks ago, but the blue markers representing human resistance were not decreasing. In some areas, they were actually increasing. This is unprecedented, admitted Councillor Threshka, her mandibles clicking nervously. No species has resisted the Mortak for this long without advanced military technology. Councillor Morden's crystalline body chimed softly as he processed information. I have been analyzing human communication intercepts. Their resistance networks do not follow any known organizational model. They appear to be completely chaotic, yet they coordinate their actions with remarkable efficiency. Vexitari studied the data more carefully. What he saw challenged everything he thought he knew about military science. They have no clear leadership hierarchy, no central command structure, no standardized equipment. By all logical analysis, their resistance should have collapsed immediately, yet it has not, Threshka observed. In fact, it appears to be growing stronger. Back on Earth, the impossible was indeed happening. In Busan, engineer Eugene Choi's improvised kinetic bombardment system had successfully destroyed 2 Mortok orbital platforms. The aliens still did not understand how humans were launching projectiles from the planet's surface that could reach their ships in orbit. In the countryside around Daegu, Colonel Lee's guerrilla tactics had spread to dozens of other resistance cells. Mortok patrols that ventured into certain areas simply disappeared, leaving behind only their equipment and confused reports from their commanders. In the skies over Jeju Island, Pilot Nam's illogical flying techniques had been adopted by other human pilots. The few remaining Earth fighters were achieving kill ratios that should have been impossible against superior alien technology. But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the minds of ordinary humans. People who had never thought of themselves as soldiers were becoming effective resistance fighters. They were learning to see patterns that their enemies missed, to adapt faster than their enemies could plan, and to turn their enemies' strengths into weaknesses. Admiral Cornash finally admitted what he had been trying to avoid thinking. He might need reinforcements. The request he sent to the Mortok High Command was brief and simple, but it contained words that he had never expected to write about a primitive planet. Human resistance stronger than anticipated. Request additional fleet assets for pacification operations. For the first time in galactic history, the supposedly primitive inhabitants of a single world were forcing one of the galaxy's most powerful military forces to ask for help. 6 months after the invasion began, Captain Wu Sung-han floated in zero gravity inside the cargo bay of a captured Mortok transport ship. Around him, his team of naval commandos checked their equipment one final time. They were about to attempt something that every military expert said was impossible: boarding and capturing an active Mortok mothership. Han was 38 years old and had commanded submarine operations before the invasion. He understood stealth, patience, and the element of surprise. More importantly, he understood that the enemy's greatest strength could also be their greatest weakness. Remember, he whispered into his communication device, Mortok ships are designed for efficiency. Every corridor leads where it should lead. Every room has the purpose it appears to have. They do not expect deception because they do not think in terms of deception. His team nodded. They had been studying captured Mortok equipment for months, learning how the aliens thought and how they built their technology. The humans had discovered something interesting. Mortok engineering was perfect, logical, and completely predictable. The transport ship they had captured 3 weeks earlier had been modified with human technology. Its exterior still looked like a Mortok vessel, but inside, Engineer Yujin Choi and her team had installed human computer systems, human weapons, and most importantly, human thinking. Target acquired, reported Lieutenant Seo Jin Park, Han's second-in-command. Through the small window, they could see the massive Mortok mothership Shadow of Dominion. It was 3 miles long and carried enough firepower to destroy entire cities. It was also Admiral Cornash's personal flagship. Begin approach, Han ordered. The captured transport requested permission to dock, using proper Mortok identification codes that technician Yoonji Song had extracted from alien computer systems. Song was 24 years old and had been a computer programmer before the war. Now she was one of Earth's most skilled hackers, able to break into alien systems that were supposedly impossible to compromise. Docking permission granted, came the response in the growling Mortok language. Proceed to Cargo Bay 7. The plan was simple in concept but incredibly dangerous in execution. Once they were inside the mothership, Han's team would split into 3 groups. One would head for the engine room, one would target the bridge, and one would secure the communication center. They would need to move quickly and quietly, capturing each area before the Mortok could respond. What made the plan possible was something the aliens had never encountered: humans who thought faster than their security systems could adapt. As the transport ship docked, Han's team prepared to show the galaxy what human soldiers could accomplish when they stopped following the rules. Meanwhile, in a medical facility hidden beneath the ruins of Busan Medical Center, Dr. Ji-Hoon Yu was making a discovery that would change the course of the war. Yu had been treating injured resistance fighters for months, but he had also been studying something else: captured Mortok soldiers. Their immune systems are incredibly efficient, he explained to his assistant, Nurse Hye-won Kim. They can resist most known diseases and toxins, but their efficiency is also their weakness. Yu had been a military doctor before specializing in infectious diseases. He understood how biological systems worked and how they could fail. What he had discovered about the Mortok was both fascinating and potentially decisive. Earth's biosphere has been evolving for billions of years, he continued, pointing to microscope images on his computer screen. Our bacteria, viruses, and other microorganisms are incredibly diverse. The Mortok immune system is designed to handle the biological threats from their own world and the worlds they have previously conquered, but they have never encountered Earth's microorganisms. Hye-won studied the images with growing understanding. You mean they are vulnerable to our diseases? Not exactly, Yu said. Their immune systems are too strong for that, but I have been studying their biological responses to various Earth microorganisms. There is something interesting happening with certain soil bacteria. The discovery was not about making the Mortok sick. It was about something much more subtle. Earth's soil bacteria produced chemical compounds that interfered with Mortok neural functions in very specific ways. The effects were not fatal, but they were significant. Exposure to these compounds causes disorientation, slower reaction times, and difficulty with complex decision-making, Yu explained. In small doses, the effects are barely noticeable, but with prolonged exposure, he did not need to finish the sentence. Hye-won understood the implications immediately. Back aboard the Shadow of Dominion, Captain Han's team was discovering that their impossible mission was actually working. Mortok security systems were designed to detect weapons, explosives, and unauthorized personnel. They were not designed to detect humans who were pretending to be authorized personnel carrying legitimate equipment for illegitimate purposes. Bridge. Team in position, whispered Lieutenant Park over the communication. Link engine team ready, reported Sergeant Kwang Ho. Lee, communication center secured, confirmed Corporal Min Jung-cho. Han smiled grimly. The first phase of the operation was complete, and the Mortok still had no idea that their flagship had been infiltrated. Execute, he ordered. Across the massive ship, human commandos struck simultaneously. In the engine room, Sergeant Lee and his team used their knowledge of Mortok engineering to take control of the ship's power systems. In the communication center, Corporal Cho activated programs that Yoonji Song had designed to take over the ship's computer networks. On the bridge, Lieutenant Park and her team burst through the doors with weapons ready. The Mortok crew was caught completely off guard. They had been trained to repel boarding attempts, but those training scenarios assumed the enemy would attack from outside the ship. No one had prepared them for enemies who were already inside, already in control of critical systems. and already 10 steps ahead of their response protocols. Admiral Cornash himself was on the bridge when the human soldiers appeared. The tall, scaled alien reached for his weapon, but Park's team was faster. "Surrender," Park said in carefully practiced Mortok, her weapon trained on the Admiral. "Your ship is under human control." For several long seconds, Cornash stared at the small human soldiers who had somehow captured his flagship. It should have been impossible. His ship was protected by the most advanced security systems in the galaxy. His crew was trained by the finest military academies in the Mortok Empire. Yet here he was, defeated by creatures his species considered primitive animals. In the Galactic Council chamber, emergency alarms were sounding for the first time in over a century. Councillor Vextari stared at the incoming reports with disbelief that was rapidly turning into something approaching. "Panic, a Mortok mothership has been captured," he announced to the assembled council members. "The Shadow of Dominion, Admiral Cornash's personal flagship, is now under human control." The silence that followed was deafening. In the recorded history of galactic civilization, no primitive species had ever captured a mothership from an advanced military force. It was simply not supposed to be possible. "How?" asked Councillor Threshka, her voice barely above a whisper. Vextari consulted his reports again, hoping he had made some kind of mistake. According to Mortok Communications, a small team of human soldiers infiltrated the ship using a captured transport vessel. They struck simultaneously at multiple critical points and overwhelmed the crew before they could respond. Councillor Morden's crystalline form chimed with what sounded almost like laughter. "The humans continue to exceed every prediction we have made about their capabilities. This changes everything," Vextari said quietly. "If humans can capture Mortok motherships, then they are not primitive at all. They are—" He could not finish the sentence because he did not want to acknowledge what the evidence was telling him. The humans were not just surviving the Mortok invasion. They were winning. 1 year after the invasion began, President Tae-Young Shin stood in the rebuilt Blue House in Seoul, looking out at a city that had been destroyed and rebuilt twice during the war. The scars were still visible, but so was something new: hope. On his desk lay a formal communication from the Galactic Council, written in dozens of languages, including Korean. It was an official invitation for Earth to join the galactic community as an equal member, not as a protected primitive world. Shin was 62 years old and had been a career diplomat before becoming president. He had spent his life negotiating treaties and managing international relations. But nothing in his experience had prepared him for negotiating with aliens who had recently been trying to conquer his planet. "The terms are acceptable," said Ambassador In-ho Jang, who had been chosen to represent humanity in galactic affairs. Jang was a former university professor who specialized in international law. Now he was studying galactic law, which turned out to be remarkably similar in many ways. Equal representation in the Council, access to galactic trade networks, and protection under interstellar law, Jang continued, reading from the formal document. "In exchange, we agree to follow galactic protocols for space travel and planetary development." Shin nodded slowly. A year ago, humanity had not even known that aliens existed. Now they were being invited to join a galactic government that included thousands of different species. "What about the Mortok prisoners?" Shin asked. "They will be returned to their homeworlds according to galactic law," Jang replied, "including Admiral Cornash, though I suspect his military career is over." The war had ended 3 months earlier with the complete surrender of the Mortok invasion force. What remained of their fleet had withdrawn from Earth space, leaving behind thousands of prisoners and enough abandoned technology to keep human scientists busy for decades. The victory had not come through superior firepower or advanced technology. It had come through something the galaxy had never seen before: an entire species that refused to fight according to established rules. Admiral Subin Kwan stood on the bridge of the Earth defense ship Sejong King, humanity's first interstellar warship. The ship had been built using a combination of human engineering and captured alien technology. It looked like no other vessel in the galaxy, because it had been designed by minds that thought differently than any other species. Kwan was 45 years old and had been promoted rapidly during the war as human naval forces expanded beyond Earth. She had commanded the liberation of 3 Mortok prison worlds, an experience that had taught her something important about galactic politics. Status report, she ordered as her ship approached the Kepler system, where another group of worlds was still under Mortok control. Long-range sensors detect 12 Mortok warships guarding the prison facilities, reported her tactical officer, Commander Dong-Sik Kim. Standard defensive formation around the main facility. Quan smiled. Standard formations were exactly what she had hoped to find. After a year of fighting humans, some Mortok commanders had learned to expect the unexpected. But these Mortok had not fought humans before. They were still thinking in traditional terms. Begin Operation Liberation, Quan ordered. The Sejong King was not alone. Around it, a small fleet of human ships moved into attack formation. Each ship was crewed by soldiers and sailors who had learned to fight during the defense of Earth. They had been trained not just in weapons and tactics, but in thinking creatively under pressure. What happened next was recorded by Mortok surveillance systems and later studied by military academers across the galaxy. The human fleet did not attack the prison facility directly. Instead, they did something that made no tactical sense. They began broadcasting on all frequencies, in the Mortok language, telling the prison guards that their invasion fleet had been defeated and their empire was collapsing. The broadcasts were true, but the Mortok guards did not believe them at first. Then the human ships began transmitting detailed records of the war on Earth, including footage of Mortok defeats, captured ships, and Admiral Cornash's surrender. Within 6 hours, 3 of the 12 Mortok warships had surrendered without firing a shot. Their crews had decided that fighting for a lost cause was pointless. The remaining 9 ships attacked, but they were facing an enemy that had defeated the best the Mortok Empire could send to Earth. The battle lasted 2 hours and ended with complete human victory. In the Galactic Council chamber, Councillor Vexistari was delivering his final report on what was now being called the Human War. The tall, blue-skinned alien who had once dismissed humanity as primitive barbarians now spoke with a mixture of respect and bewilderment. The Mortok Empire has formally requested mediation to end hostilities with Earth, he announced to the assembled council. Their military losses include 60% of their invasion fleet, including 12 motherships, over 300 support vessels, and approximately 2 million personnel captured or killed. The numbers were staggering, but what impressed the council even more was how the humans had achieved these results. Human casualties were significantly lower than Mortok casualties. Vextari continued. This appears to be the first recorded case of a primitive species achieving a favorable casualty ratio against an advanced military force. Councillor Threshka clicked her mandibles thoughtfully. Perhaps we need to reconsider our definition of primitive. Indeed, agreed Councillor Morden, his crystalline form chiming softly. The humans have demonstrated that technological advancement is not the only measure of a species' capabilities. Vextari nodded reluctantly. I propose the adoption of the human doctrine. No species should be considered primitive based solely on their technology level. Military capability, adaptive capacity, and strategic thinking may be more important factors in determining a species' potential. The vote was unanimous. For the first time in galactic history, the Council officially acknowledged that they had been wrong about the nature of civilization itself. Back on Earth, in a small cafe in Busan, Dr. Ji-Hoon Yu sat with engineer Yu-Jin Choi, sharing a meal and talking about the future. The war was over, but both of them were still working. Yu was helping to establish medical protocols for treating the various alien species that Earth would soon be dealing with. Choi was designing new spacecraft based on hybrid human-alien technology. Do you think things will be different now? Choi asked, sipping her coffee. Yu considered the question carefully. The galaxy has spent thousands of years thinking that there was only one way to be civilized. We showed them that there are other ways. That will change everything eventually. Through the cafe window they could see construction crews rebuilding the city, but they could also see something new. Alien visitors walking alongside humans. Some of them former enemies who had come to study the species that had defeated them. 1 year later, Admiral Kwan returned from her 3rd liberation mission to find Earth transformed. The planet was still recognizably human, but it was also becoming something more. Alien technology was being integrated with human innovation. Alien visitors came to study human military tactics and adaptive strategies. Human students were leaving Earth to attend universities on distant worlds. But perhaps the most significant change was in how the galaxy thought about war and peace. The human war had shown that conflicts could be won through intelligence and adaptability, rather than just superior firepower. Other species began studying human methods not just for military purposes, but for solving problems in general. The humans had not just survived their first contact with galactic civilization, they had changed it forever. In the final scene, President Shin stood before the Galactic Council for the first time, ready to represent humanity in galactic affairs. As he took his place among beings from hundreds of different worlds, he carried with him a simple message. Diversity of thought was not a weakness to be eliminated, but a strength to be celebrated. The galaxy would never be the same.